if I can. So. Okay, maybe. Are you able to? Okay, I think I was able to pull it up. Are you all able to see this?
We see the presentation view, and yes, you can start.
Okay, great. So today my title of the presentation that I'd like to share with you all is called Fostering Child and Youth Wellbeing in Complex Systems. And I will be the first to say, I don't know the answers here, but I'm going to share my current thinking based off of work we've been doing here in the community and across the United States for the past 10 to 15 years. So the perspective I'm sharing with you all is things I'm learning, things that I've tried, things that I failed at, and hopefully you all can give me some wonderful advice as we keep going. So I've been around for a bit, been doing a lot of projects. So I share this not to say like, look at all the cool stuff I've been doing, but just to share perspectives of who's kind of influenced my thinking and who has been interested in doing this work. Anyone from, the Administration for Children and Families, which is the U.S. Department at the federal level that cares for children and families, and to Google, like folks care about interesting things here in the system space. And I think that's really great for us as system dynamicists as we think about, our impact in the world. So today I want to show you the unique work of mapping systems that serve young people from a developmental perspective. I'd also like to share things that I've learned from that in partnership with communities. I love that Birgit was talking about going to the people and making sure that you partner from the beginning. And I'll share some of the things that we've learned along the way too, maybe some stops. And then current work to understand teaching systems for young people in school. So I focus on kids, but I think the outcomes of in the framework that we use in partnership with community to solve these really entrenched challenges probably transcend just, children. So I'll start with systems can be great. We know this. I like to think about in my work, like, why am I doing this? This is so hard. We always say like, model the problem, not the system. And so I think in the problem space all the time. But on the flip side, I try to encourage myself by thinking about, well, what is the opposite of that? Like systems can be great, but like why do we care so much about making great systems? And I think it's because when you've experienced a system that typically feels broken and it actually works for you, it feels amazing. Like that expectation versus reality, that gap actually changes something about your life. So how many of you have been to the store Uniqlo? I don't know if that exists in South Africa, but maybe you've gone in other places in the world. Uniqlo is a clothing store, and I have it up here because it is one of those stores that when you go in, you don't expect much. It makes basic clothing wear, maybe like, sweats, shirts, nothing special. But there's something special in the experience of purchasing these clothes. Like they're very affordable, but the checkout system, if you've ever gone to it, you just take all your clothing, you dump it in that bin that's on the right there. It says place items here. And then it magically just and tallies up how much you owe. You put your card on and it's done. The whole process takes about 30 seconds. I think it takes longer to get your credit card out or your tap to pay out and actually pay for it than it does for it to actually, put all the clothing together. And so, this is a silly example, but it's something that like when you expect to be in a long line because the clothing is affordable and you really like that, what you see, people are just waiting outside for Uniqlo to open. It's really, really nice. So the same goes for, what you experience maybe when you can think about like biking systems. In the US, it is terrifying to bike in some communities. In mine in particular, I think we've had 4 cyclist deaths just this year. So when you have a safe and efficient system like biking lanes that are protected or even roadways that have enough space for you to go around these wide loads and large cars, this can be very magical for the experience. And I think the same could be true for childhood and adolescence, especially for kids. I come from a social work school, especially for kids who are involved or have experienced trauma in their life and are now involved in a system that may or may not be the ideal scenario for them. So, we think about foster care, child abuse. We think about systems and youth homelessness. And I think the opportunity of child and adolescence, like when things are going well, there is so many things that kids can learn. And that's why we care a lot about, education and making sure that, kids do have these magical moments. As a parent, you think about this. But when things aren't going well, we have, the reality, there are so many challenges. So from, foster and adoption processes in a system where the wait time to be taken out of a home that may be abusive and then placed in a new home that may be safe for you. These are very common photos in the US where it says things like, happy picture with the new family. The child is like, we were case number whatever for 1,212 days. It's 4 years. 4 years of a child's development where they're sitting and waiting, hopefully in a safe foster home, not always. And often sometimes the re-traumatization experience of bouncing from home to home when they cannot take care of you can create so much more difficulty than there needs to be, inefficiencies. Youth homelessness, same thing. And then, mental health, suicide, self-harm, that's an area that I care a lot about. So when there's inefficiencies and being able to get support when there is a crisis or you have attempted to take your life for whatever reason, because you've hit that tipping point. When child serving systems do it with the idea of development in mind, doing something that's appropriate for your age level, it really does make a big difference and it can change someone's life. So the question I often think about is how do we provide excellence and efficiency when the product is human delivered? In the previous examples I shared about bike lanes and clothing at Uniqlo, those are systems that provide a product. Yes, there's service involved as well, but really there's like a man-made thing that you are consuming as a human that is the thing that, we are excited to get. But in a child serving system like the foster adoptive care, mental health education, these are all services that are provided by people. And, if you think about them, it's care, it's attention, it's, cognitive in terms of like mental health and counseling. Education is all like ideas and learning. And so when you are trying to fix systems where the product itself is delivered by a human and transferred through cognition and emotions and feelings, fixing those systems becomes really, really challenging. Because not only are you thinking about the end user, which tends to be children and the families, youth, you now have to think about the product deliverer because they are the product. The teacher is the product. The counselor is the product. The foster family is the product. So when we think about these things, it requires an understanding of human development and how the brain develops, both for young people and the people who serve them. And so getting into this space requires an understanding psychology, it requires an understanding of human behavior and the decision heuristics which people use to figure out and decide, how they're going to behave in a system that does also include things like, books and computers and what I'm thinking about what's in schools, buildings and managing those things. But then at the end of the day, you're really managing the people who are creating a relationship with the other people who are alleviating some suffering. So this is the conundrum that I've been circling around for many, many years, is how do you truly understand how people are making decisions in really complex systems, especially when maybe you haven't experienced the challenge yourself, but then you're trying to understand how someone would navigate it based on the conditions that they're in. So this is where system dynamics, when I discovered it in a class, I didn't discover it. When I took a class that had system dynamics as the core, my brain was like popping, you all probably remember that experience too, of learning that there are ways to understand a complex system. There are ways to map it. And there are ways to think about the decision heuristics, the ways people make decisions in those complex structures. And so learning about system dynamics and then applying it now into this space has been such an interesting endeavor. And I think in general, intervening in complex systems, we know can be counterintuitive. We see a lot of these types of, experiences of, unintended consequences or side effects. The classic example of widening highways doesn't fix traffic, but we keep doing it. So I was trying to think of like, well, in our space in social systems, what does this look like? And intervening in a complex system without understanding the way people respond, we know can exacerbate an original problem. So in my space, I don't know what it's like in the schools where you all are, but in the United States, we have this concept called zero tolerance policies. It became very, very, very popular in the 1990s, where basically to address pretty much drug abuse, drug enforcement, it was a philosophy or policy that mandates severe or punitive consequences regardless of the infraction. So for instance, a child brings a leaf in their backpack and a teacher mistakes it for marijuana. Instead of just saying like, wow, maybe there is something that like I could have done better, this child was suspended for a year and not allowed to go to school at the school at which they were assigned. And therefore they missed out on all the school. So these are like, that's one example. Or like a kid who takes, their finger and maybe like, they've been playing video games. So they might say to their friend like pew pew or something, and then they get suspended perhaps for reasons unknown. But there's all sorts of things that, have come out from this where we find now that the side effects of zero tolerance policies promoted further misbehavior. It made drug policies worse. And, if we're thinking in systems, you might say like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, when kids aren't able to go to school now, like, what are they doing at home? They fall further behind. Like we think in these systems, but that's not always the case with policymakers. This is also the case with No Child Left Behind, which was a big federal policy enacted in 2001, 2002, that mandated education reform. And it was based on this idea that we need standards. Everyone should be achieving math and reading at certain measurable levels. And they rewarded teachers and penalized teachers when their students weren't able to meet those goals. The intention was good. It was trying to figure out ways to make sure that kids who were experiencing poverty may not have had the same resources as other kids who had more resources to do well in school could then get those resources. But human decision heuristics, because they put all of these evaluation criteria and like even dollar signs tied to whether you perform or not, started creating these complex behaviors where teachers were now either saying like, well, if this kid is performing like in the below basic level, which means like they're so far from being proficient, we're not even going to pay attention to them. We're going to work on the low hanging fruit, the kids who are just right above the line, like right by the line, and push them over so that we can look like our numbers are working well. This is under Bush. And there was also a lot of issues that came out. This was a big kind of issue that came out that is just an example of probably other schools also experience this too. In Atlanta, Georgia, they found that, there were 178 teachers and administrators that were changing answers to increase their test scores because funding for their schools was tied to whether their students would do better. And so a few of them went to jail for this. They were thinking like, well, we need to get resources for our school. If there's no resources, then we can't do anything for our kids. It penalized those schools. And so, further marginalization of schools already struggling. So those are some examples of, policy resistance, things that we know if we don't think about the full system and how people make decisions, it's going to be problematic. So learning how to understand the system from all angles is very important. But how do you do this? One method we use was built here by Dr. Peter Hobman, who you all may know from the System Dynamics Society. In 2014, they were compelled to write a book on the practices they were developing at WashU, and it was called Community-Based System Dynamics. Now, you've heard of group model building, you've probably heard of community-based participatory modeling, but community-based system dynamics is very specific in that it has a value system that says, and is built off of Paulo Freire's work and Miles Horton's work of community organizing, where the people themselves must participate in the liberation of themselves. It's a kind of this value and ethos that not only do they give the most deepest system insights, but when they participate, they feel different. They feel they have power and they can drive the system decisions in ways that give them dignity and are most likely also to create utilization of the work. So we've done this now in many different places. Here's some work from Changing Systems, which is a youth development program here that we run at WashU. And we did 4 different cycles where we invite youth interns to learn how to do systems thinking and then learn how to facilitate systems change with their peers on various topics. This one was on gun violence. There's one on educational equity. We've done youth homelessness and other topics. Another initiative we've done in the wild is this Early Childhood Collective Impact Initiative. Basically, we knew that early childhood is good for students and young people from the ages 0 to 5, but the system was not organized in a way to deliver it at scale. And so we've worked with adults in figuring out how do they do collective impact and make sure that they're talking to each other so that kids are ready for school when they get there. A different project, but under the same vein, we've worked with parents to understand why they're not sending their kids to early childhood systems in schools, even though, you know, they figured out how to create seats and learned a lot about the ways in which people trust or distrust systems and therefore do not send their kids, even though it may be free for them. We've also done this work post-COVID with schools when teachers told us that the kids are not well when they came back from the pandemic. And this was called the Social Emotional Supports for Students in Schools initiative. We worked with elementary school students to understand what they thought about how to show up at school and their mental health. And kids told us that one of the biggest leverage points was their teacher and being able to talk to their teacher. And when their teacher knows that something's not going well and they're feeling bad, not penalizing them for maybe acting out, but like asking them questions like, what's going on? Versus, you know, why are you doing that? Other issues that we've tackled, school systems collaboration and systems thinking in schools. We've done a lot of work, but today I want to talk to you about this current project we're working on. And it's this idea of teacher care and retention. So you kind of see the arc. COVID happened, lots of things going on. Teachers and superintendents at local schools have asked us to address teacher support and retention because only 60% of the teachers that are currently in the school any given year are staying on. And so you can imagine with about 40% of your teachers turning over every year, this is a big problem. Here on this graph you have, and this is for the entire state, it's much more severe in high needs schools. First year teachers and non-tenured teachers during the 2020 to 2023 data, the dynamics are there's a reinforcing loop driving down the number of teachers that are staying in the profession. And this is, you know, a problem, but, you know, there's tons of studies on this topic already. I mean, so many that it's very overwhelming to do a literature review. But a lot of them list all the correlates, like here are all the drivers, here are why teachers are burning out, here's why they're quitting. And they'll say things like chronic stress, anger, you know, substance abuses, anxiety, mental fatigue, depression, workload, student motivation. They list all of these things. And existing literature is very linear, like a lot of the things that we see out there. Don't you want to just draw a feedback loop back from emotional exhaustion to teacher-student relationship? This is how we've been testing. This is like a recent study in 2024. So we're testing how to address emotional exhaustion with teachers. But as system dynamicists, we know that these things feed back onto each other over time. Alcohol and drugs consumption can create, you know, can be a cause of anxiety or be caused by anxiety, but then also feed back on your anxiety. These are all things that we know are interconnected. So we propose to these educators that maybe we take a different approach to understanding teacher turnover by getting into the dynamics of understanding why teachers are turning over, why they're burning out. And so we've done this a lot with different groups. And we've already come up with lots of models. This is stuff that came up even before we talked to these teachers. And
Saras,
so we're now trying to,
sorry,
yes,
you've got 5 minutes left.
thank you. I will get there. Thank you. So yeah, we've got lived experience, and we know that, you know, when teachers are included, we get a better understanding of what's actually happening. So We propose to do a system dynamics model with them by showing them a concept model where teachers flow through a system. Because of stress, they start quitting, and then as teachers quit, they become less effective. As there's less effective teachers in the classroom, that leads to more workload pressure, and then more stress. So this burnout loop starts happening. And then more effective teachers leads to more mentoring. But when there's less effective teachers in the classroom, there's less mentoring. So less teachers becoming skilled. That leads to more stress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We showed them this. We're like, we could do some modeling. They're like, cool, let's do it. So 2 school districts have signed on. We started doing some work this summer to get a more detailed view for those specific school districts of what's happening in their schools. And then we're working on integrating existing worker burnout models from Homer, Veltuis et al. Forgive me if I'm butchering your name. And then Stahlschmidt, who's done some work on foster care case turnover, and integrating it into this new version of a model that will take into account more of the dynamics of the system globally. So this one includes, feedback from the teachers that we've worked with on the ground who are talking about the experience of performance gaps leading to more pressure from schools, leading to less connection between their students, and then more students leaving in some ways as they present themselves in the least best light. We're calibrating our model right now, we're testing it, and we're hoping to create some interventions. So next steps as we go on, this year we are doing some surveys on burnout. There's some validated surveys that we have approval now to do multiple waves of data with. We're doing semi-structured interviews with teachers, and we're updating our model and testing it with teacher-proposed interventions. Hopefully this leads to some leverage points that are teacher informed, things that teachers actually want. They're like, no more mindfulness and yoga, please. Like, we are done with that. Like, I'm sure it helps for the moment, but this is a systems problem. And then we're going to pilot an intervention with these schools based on what we learn. Hopefully this also leads to a regional framework, and some have said a statewide framework that we can use to do more teacher burnout prevention and care. And I think things that we've learned, just real quick, is that in partnership, sorry, the animations are coming out. Systems change in human service requires a deep understanding of psychological structures. I've mentioned that. It's really hard to figure out how people will behave when we're asking them about problem behavior. People are designed to talk about social desirability, but when they are all together in a room and they find that they say like, oh, you too, you do this too, it actually is very, very cathartic for them. Asking people who serve children to make in complex systems to describe decisions they're making can be liberating, like I mentioned. And sometimes the research finds that the problem itself is not actually the problem. There's a deeper structural issue. And we're definitely finding that in some of our partner school districts where they are pointing not to teacher burnout, but to a culture issue between the admin and the staff that goes way beyond what we typically expected. So how do we better understand these issues? This is my running list. I want to focus on the mental models and the way that people see the world. We've been asking what others know. So instead of saying like, what do you do? We'll say like, what do other people do in your system to kind of understand, things like burnout. Like when teachers are burnt out, they talked about abusing alcohol and drugs that came out in some of our models where it's like teacher drinking makes it to almost every single group model building map that we have developed, which is interesting. And then asking people to think out loud helps to take you through their operational decision-making process. And then examining the physics of the system and just, there is a lot of literature out there to learn from, so that's great. And then learning from that and integrating into our models and also always checking our assumptions. So just going to leave you with this what if. So what if we fix this? Like right now I'm deep in this idea of like, oh, teacher burnout, like why are they burning out? But what if we fixed it? I think that's what motivates me. What if we fixed, faster and created a faster, safer adoption process? What does it mean for families? What if we could efficiently rehouse youth who are homeless for the long term? Like, what does that mean for the kid who's sleeping on the street or on a couch in someone's house? Like, what does it mean for their long-term development? And what if we could make sure that young people got mental health supports in a timely manner that actually affected their livelihoods? Like, what would happen? So in this case, like, what if, students in high poverty communities who are engaging with teachers who might be their only social support, actually had a teacher who showed up well and happy and, excited and with skills and tools for themselves to be able to learn and teach in the classroom. Like, what does that mean for our youngest people and their development over time? So these are the questions that guide me. If you want to learn more, you want to reach out, help me figure this out, reach out at this my email, you know where to find me. But yeah, I'd love to invite any questions or thoughts as we talk about this.
Thank you, Saras. I think we will have a combined question session at the end of this session.